Boy, this episode is on something that hit me near and dear, SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. If you have any GI issues that just seem to not go away, you might think you're just food intolerant. Who knows? Gluten insensitive, leaky gut, whatever it is that you're having trouble with, it may be SIBO. Find out on this show. Also, you're going to hear about a revolutionary breakthrough, perhaps. We're testing it in my doctor group for severe SIBO, which to date has been extremely difficult to resolve. But this may be your problem, and there may be a hidden solution. Check out this show with William Davis. Wow, man, what a guy. Wheat Belly? Yeah, that's the guy. Check out the show. Hey, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Cyto Detox. Look, podcasts cost money. There's a lot of production going around this, but we are grateful to have Cyto Detox as one of the sponsors. It's so easy for me to talk about the product because myself and my family use it constantly as we practice what I preach. For over 15 years, I've talked about and taught doctors and the public about cellular detox. And I'll tell you, Cyto was a breakthrough. Cyto was a breakthrough for us, and it's changed so many lives. So we're grateful that they sponsor Cellular Healing TV. It makes sense, doesn't it? They should.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing Cyto Detox product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit detoxoffer.com. Again, that's detoxoffer.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith, and today I'm excited to introduce Dr. William Davis, cardiologist and author of the #1 New York Times bestselling Wheat Belly series of books, and more recently, the ultimate gut healing book, Super Gut. Dr. Davis is here to teach us about SIBO and how a disrupted microbiome can be expressed as chronic physical and mental health conditions. This is a fascinating topic we just can't learn enough about. So let's welcome Dr. William Davis and, of course, Dr. Pompa. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Glad to meet you both.
Well, hey, look, it's a pleasure having you here. I became familiar with you because of Wheat Belly. I mean, it really put you on the map, and I was someone who promoted, hey, if you have inflammation, you want to feel a little better, start by just eliminating grains, right? I think the great thing about Wheat Belly in today's conversation is not Wheat Belly, but you really brought in the history of gluten, right? And why gluten became such a problem, the history of dwarf wheat, the whole thing. And you were the first to do that. I always give you, even to this day, credit for that. You brought it to the map. Appreciate that. Thank you. Now, today's topic is one that resonates so deeply with me because I've suffered from SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And if you don't know what it is, haven't heard of it, you will, because Dr. Davis and myself agree that this is now a massive epidemic spreading like wildfire. We're going to tear down why. We're going to tear down some solutions that we have found. And I think he has an amazing perspective on this. We are currently, with my doctor group, testing some of Dr. Davis's theories, some of the things that he's found works, and that's why he is on this show. Mine came from a chronic infection in my mouth that went to my gut, and man, this woke me up to how many people today think they have just food intolerance or think they have this gut problem or that gut problem. Maybe it's IBS, because most of that is in fact SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. I have to start with this question. Bill, not many of us doctors, even in this space, really understand this condition, or just how many people have this, right? I mean, this epidemic. What got you here? How did you land here?
Well, so I see fairly miraculous changes in health just by, as you point out, going wheat and grain free.
Yeah.
and then addressing some common nutrient deficiencies that are unique to modern life, not from the diet, but from modern lifestyles, like magnesium. We all have to filter our water, it removes all magnesium, and that has real health implications like high blood pressure, muscle cramps, and heart rhythm disorders, and osteoporosis. So we add magnesium. We don't get enough omega-3 fatty acids because modern people don't like the idea of eating the brains of animals anymore. We can't eat all the fish we want because of mercury. Can't eat all the shellfish we want because of cadmium. So we replace a handful of nutrients that all contribute to reversing this common situation of insulin resistance. And I also included basic efforts to rebuild the microbiome, high potency multi-species probiotic, fermented foods, prebiotic fibers. And even then, people would say, I've lost 47 pounds. I'm no longer type 2 diabetic. I feel great, but I'm still intolerant to these 18 foods.
And Bill, I mean, to your point though, some of these people go, I can't take prebiotics. These flare me up. This flares me up. And that's often a sign that they do, in fact, even have SIBO, right? Because if I took a prebiotic, forget it. I'm bloated. My stomach's out to here.
Or as you point out, intolerances to probiotics, intolerances to prebiotics, intolerances to fermented foods. So it was clear there was something else that was missing, even though we took steps to try to rebuild the microbiome. That's when I started to ask, could the answers be in the microbiome? And there's a ton of answers. And thankfully, the science has progressed so vigorously, so fast, that some of the answers are coming at us at lightning speed. But as you point out, one of the things I did, very simple, I went back through all the studies that asked questions like this. Of the 65 to 70 million people with irritable bowel syndrome in the US, what proportion in the studies test positive for SIBO, hydrogen gas in the breath? It tells you have SIBO. And most studies, it varied, 24%, some studies, 84%. So, but around 40%. So 40% of 60 to 70 million people, well, that's 20 some million people right there with SIBO. People with fatty liver. Fatty liver is now epidemic. Half the population in the US, half has fatty liver. And we know that 50% of those people have SIBO, that test positive for hydrogen gas in the breath. So that's, if half the population in the US, which is 150, 160 million, half of that, about 75 million more people with SIBO, go through all the diseases, fibromyalgia, food intolerances, type 2 diabetes, obesity, autoimmune disease, neurodegeneration. Add all those numbers up. There's some overlap, of course. Obese type 2 diabetics with fatty liver, for instance. But you add it up, you easily exceed 100 million people in this country conservatively. I think that's too conservative. I think it's easily 150 million people, or 1 out of 2 people.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I kind of want to back up, because I'm sitting here thinking of my viewer, and because the reality of this that you and I both agree on, that most people have this and don't even know it, haven't even heard of it. And most doctors even haven't heard of it, let alone diagnose it. Give a very simple explanation of what SIBO is. Meaning, we're talking about small intestinal bacteria. We're going, what does that even mean, right? And then we'll get into some of the causative factors. But I mean, again, you mentioned hydrogen in the breath, and that's one of the tests you can do. But like, people are like, what does that mean? So give a quick explanation.
Sure. So people have been exposed to a number of factors that have killed off healthy microbes, mostly antibiotics. Most people by age 40 have gotten 30 courses of antibiotics. But there's other factors also, like glyphosate in Roundup, the herbicide Roundup. Glyphosate is an herbicide, but it's also an antibiotic. But it selects for unhealthy species. And there's other herbicides, other pesticides, emulsifying agents in ice cream and salad dressing, like polysorbate 80, synthetic sweeteners like sucralose and aspartame, other drugs, stomach acid blocking drugs, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, birth control pills, statin cholesterol drugs, heavy metals, industrial compounds. It's so many things, but one of the consequences is killing off potentially beneficial species, hundreds of them. And these are wonderful microbes that did wonderful things for us. We've lost them. And then when you do that, they perform kind of a almost like a policing function. When you lose those good guys, the bad guys, mostly stool microbes like E. coli, Shigella, Citrobacter, as well as Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Enterococcus, all proliferate. But the crazy thing is they have also now ascended up into the 24 feet of small bowel, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But it means 30 feet of unhealthy, mostly stool microbes. Now, they only live for a few hours. They don't live for years, live only for a few hours. When they die, many of them release their byproducts from their cell wall, and it gets into the bloodstream. And that's the very important process of endotoxemia. But now we know with good research how SIBO, 30 feet of microbes, can be experienced in the skin as rosacea, psoriasis, or eczema, or in the brain as dementia, or Parkinson's disease, or depression, or in the joints and muscle as fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis. But as you know, we've got to re-examine virtually all common chronic diseases: high blood pressure, coronary disease, atrial fibrillation, depression, dementia, in light of this phenomenon.
So, I mean, let me just say it even a different way because it's worth saying twice. These guys that are nasty sometimes, right? In the large intestine, you can deal with them. You have other microbes that almost keep them in bay. They end up in the small intestine where there's not as great of mucous membrane, frankly. It's a single layer, I believe, as opposed to a double layer in the large intestine. But they end up creating holes. They end up creating inflammation. They end up getting through, creating an endotoxic situation, meaning toxic from the inside out, and thereby leading to skin problems, thereby leading to other problems throughout the body that people are chasing down those symptoms. And meanwhile, it could be because they have these guys that do not belong in the small intestine, Now, let me ask you a question, because sometimes it's not even bad guys. Sometimes it's good guys that just in certain numbers, they're great in this large intestine, end up in the small intestine and still cause problems because the gas comes from these bacteria eating fiber. That's what they do, right? They eat fiber, and it's part of how we get energy. It's part of how we function, actually. But when they do that in the small intestine, boom, we get the bloat, right? So what about that? So we have small guys, or these good guys maybe, that get up there. In general, bacteria that belong in the large intestine end up in the small intestine. And let's talk about all the ways they end up there. That's what, if I was listening to this, I'd be like, okay, great. How do they get there? Why do they get there? And then what can we do about it?
It's probably all boils down to the shift in species. That is, we lose these kind of traffic cop microbes, all the good they did, and because they produce factors, they compete. They produce factors that suppress some of the unhealthy species. So now, what do we do about it? That's one of the problems. We could do. You hate to think about antibiotics because antibiotics got most people here in the first place, but you could. As you know, there's an antibiotic called rifaximin or Xifaxan. It's not very effective. Maybe efficacy of 25, maybe 60%. There are things you can do to increase efficacy, typically not passed on by your typical gastroenterologist. There are some herbal solutions. Only 2 have been subjected to any kind of formal scrutiny, but they work. We've used them. They work. The Candibactin regimen, the FC-Biocide regimen. But, I asked a different question. I asked this question. If you have SIBO, 30 feet of microbes living and dying rapid succession, as you point out, an area that has a single layer, much more fragile mucous barriers compared to the double layer of the colon. Well, what if you took a probiotic, a commercial probiotic? Will SIBO go away? No. Right? You might get a little reduction in bloating, a little reduction in diarrhea, but it won't go away.
And sometimes it makes it worse.
Sometimes it makes it worse. Exactly. Yeah. So I asked, what if we chose microbes instead that colonize the upper GI tract? That's where SIBO occurs. What if we chose species that are the best at producing so-called bacteriocins? These are natural antibiotics that some microbes produce, effective against the species of SIBO. So I chose 3. I chose a strain of Lactobacillus gasseri, the BNR17 strain of Lactobacillus rhodori, and a strain of Bacillus coagulans. I co-fermented them. Now, this gets a little confusing. We make yogurt out of it, but it's not yogurt like the store.
Right.
Okay. So we ferment for extended periods because, for instance, reuteri, Lactobacillus reuteri, doubles every 3 hours. They don't have sexual reproduction like humans. They have asexual reproduction. One microbe becomes two becomes four. Well, reuteri, for instance, doubles every 3 hours. So if you did like they did in a factory making yogurt and only allowed it to ferment for 4 hours, you'd get nothing. So we ferment for 36 hours and we get around 250, 260 billion counts of bacteria. So we're increasing bacterial counts many fold by doing extended fermentation. And you know what? It's delicious. It tastes great with some blueberries or something. So we consume a half a cup a day. And so far, what I call SIBO yogurt, 90% of everybody who's done this has tested negative for SIBO. And that's another issue. So what we're doing is using this device, the air device, to test for H2 gas. So people test positive. They do the SIBO yogurt for 4 weeks. Now here's the confusing twist. Reuteri, one of the good microbes, also produces hydrogen gas and colonizes the upper GI tract. So you have to actually stop the yogurt, wait 2 weeks, and then test to see if you're negative. A little confusing. I wish that wasn't the case. We can't do anything about it. But so far, 90%. We will do a formal trial to validate this. But so far, about 35 people have done it. 90% have tested negative. So, if we said the solution is colectomy, removing your colon or some other awful thing like exploratory laparotomy, we've got to be damn confident that we know what we're doing. But what if the solution is a yogurt?
Right. Now it's a simple solution you can make at home. 3 bacteria in your book. Matter of fact, you have your book. Hold your book up. Yeah, sorry about that. And you give the bacteria in the book, just for people listening. There it is, right there, super gut. And you tell exactly how to make it in your own kitchen. And my doctors right now, as I said at the top of the show, we're all doing this process. We're experimenting with our hardest cases, and we might have to do a part 2 on the show, but I wanted to bring you on ahead of time just to announce what we're doing. But okay, I do have a question though. So the reuteri bacteria that you put in there, you said produces hydrogen gas. There's a type of bacteria called archaea that feed from hydrogen gas, which is kind of always the weird thing, right? Because you kill off one and then you can almost increase another, right? Or, so how do you combat the archaea that may be there that potentially could feed off the hydrogen gas and become stronger and more nasty? Do you have a method?
As you know, the science behind the archaea is so preliminary, it's hard to know. By the way, the newest version of the air device, this is the old one. The new one's black, but mine's in the kitchen. But it looks the same, but it's black. Also measures methane gas. So that's how you identify methanogen overgrowth, like Methanobrevibacter smithii. There's a little bit of evidence that the conventional antibiotic, rifaximin, may be combined with neomycin, which is a toxic antibiotic. That there's some evidence for efficacy of that combination. There's a little bit of evidence for the candibactin ARBR regimen may work. There's one study suggesting that Lactobacillus reuteri can, but I'm not so sure I believe that, because I'm not seeing that play out in real life. I'm not seeing people get rid of their methane measurements with the reuteri. So I'm a little skeptical that that's true. I wish it was true, but I don't think it is true. Beyond that, I don't know. We don't have enough science to know how to get rid of. Here's my suspicion, though. One thing is not clear. Does slow transit cause methanogen overgrowth, or does methanogen overgrowth cause slowed transit, constipation? And it's my suspicion that people who allow slowed transit to occur may be encouraging methanogen overgrowth. And part of the solution may be something like magnesium for an osmotic effect.
So to interpret what Doc's saying is there's a theory that these particular bacteria, these methane producers, cause constipation. But he's saying perhaps constipation is allowing them to increase. Is that kind of what you're saying? And if we help the constipation, maybe we can keep those guys lower.
And of course, it doesn't hurt to not be constipated and have more rapid transit.
Right.
It's an odd thing, when we look at these studies, I would these researchers great credit for studying the stool of indigenous populations, like people living in the jungles of New Guinea or the east coast of Africa or the jungles of the Brazilian rainforest. I mean, go in and ask these people for their stool. I give these people credit. When you look at those microbiomes, they're filled with methane producers, much more than wheat. So it makes you wonder, is it the methane producers that are a problem, or is it the context they occur in that is the broader microbiome? So I think that's where the science is kind of heading. It's that the methanogens themselves may not be the problem.
I agree.
Maybe the company they keep.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, people, there's specific SIBO bacteria that cause these methane gas, right? Still causes massive bloating. By the way, the number one sign of SIBO is bloating sometime after meals. And for me, by the way, rarely was it right away. It was hours away, which means it was the bacteria were in my lower small intestine, right? And it was very difficult to actually test. When I did breath tests, they were negative, right? Back then, we didn't have that device. We were just using a breath test. Sorry, my dogs are barking. Send it to the lab. But the point is, though, is that they would say that the methane producers, that you have them if you have constipation. If you have the hydrogen producers, you have them because you have diarrhea. But it's, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know how easy that is.
Yeah. You made an excellent point, though, and that is timing. It's all about timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how the air device also works. The inventor, Dr. Angus Short, PhD engineer in Dublin, Ireland, when he first released the device, he built it as a device for navigating a low FODMAPs diet, low fiber, low sugar diet, people with irritable bowel syndrome. So I called him when I finally got a hold of it in 2019. I said, Angus, that's not, I'm telling the inventor what he invented. I said, that's not what it is. This is a mapping device based on what you point out, the timing of hydrogen gas release, because microbes produce hydrogen gas. We don't produce hydrogen gas.
Right.
You can use it to map where microbes are living.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, producing hydrogen gas is also a normal thing, right? I mean, it's not a bad thing, just like the methane, right? So again, these bacteria, it's not necessarily the bacteria, it's where they are, their populations, and then they become a problem. All of a sudden now we have all these apparent food intolerances, et cetera. You mentioned the low FODMAP diet, it's worth mentioning, right? So by the way, many people who know that you have this problem, SIBO, have been led to a low FODMAP diet. This is just basically, it's a diet that avoids certain carbohydrates that have a certain fiber, really, that ferment easily in the small intestine, right? So it's basically eating less of these things. Garlic and onions, I always say, is more diagnostic than even the test. How do you do with garlic and onion? They're super high FODMAP. They ferment very easily. Inulin, which is in a lot of healthy products, if you don't do well with that, you probably have SIBO. So anyways, but low FODMAP eating, it doesn't fix anything, does it, Bill? It really just kind of mitigates the symptoms. And it does work, by the way. I mean, if I eat low FODMAP, I definitely can lower lower down the symptoms when I had a flare up.
Absolutely right. In fact, may make the situation worse long term, because what you're in effect doing is starving microbes. But you can't say, I'm going to starve the bad guys and let the good guys eat. Doesn't work that way. Yeah. So it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on gangrene. Yeah. The problem is still there. In fact, you may make it worse. And so the whole key, as you know, is to kind of reestablish order. No one's got the full answer exactly how to do this, because you got to wonder, if the people in the Brazilian rainforest or the jungles of New Guinea have a completely different microbiome, though very similar to each other, thousands of miles apart, should we mimic theirs? But theirs is so different Probably not.
Yeah.
We have species they don't have, they have species we don't have. But it may be partially adaptation to their unique environments. It may be part of our microbiome. It's also an adaptive response. It may be a beneficial thing, like bifidobacteria in children. They need it. And if they don't have it, they can't digest many of the components of breast milk. So and yet the primitive cultures don't have bifidobacteria. So there may be some aspects of our microbiome that are actually beneficial.
Okay, so let me just pull out some of the brilliance of what you've done here, right? So to date, we have dealt with killing. To your point, and to my point, killing can work with certain cases, meaning whether it be certain antibiotics specifically, whether it be natural killers, it can work. For severe SIBO, I think it's been pretty much a fail. So your approach now is saying, okay, let's do this differently. Let's put these specific types of bacteria to bring balance back into the gut, in particular into the small intestine. So you chose 3 bacteria that really affect the small intestine, more so than the large intestine, fermented them to big numbers, which again, that's why you're doing this at home. That's why you're fermenting 36 hours. And as of right now, you have found that it's affecting at least 90% of these more severe cases. So in a nutshell, that's what you've done. Okay, let's talk about, how hard is it to make this yogurt? Where do you buy these 3 strains at?
That's the challenge, is sourcing the 3 strains. So in my Super Gut book, I tell you where to go. But so the Gasseri BNR 17, we were getting from South Korea, the company that actually commercialized that strain. But then Joe Mercola, when you buy from a manufacturer, they'll say something like, Dr. Pompa, we'll send it to you, but you have to order 150,000 bottles.
Yeah, Joe has the ability to do that.
Right. So he did that. So he's got a product called BioThin, and you just need 1 capsule. And then we use the strains.
They BioThin, like THIN?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now with Reuteri, so one of the things I'm doing is, one of the things we want to do long-term is to choose microbes for optimal effects. So I have a mouse trial ready to go. We're going to test various strains of Reuteri to see which one is better at these kinds of effects. In this case, oxytocin provocation, the hormone oxytocin, of the hormone of love and empathy, not so much SIBO. But we have a mouse trial ready to go. We're going to do a series of cycles. I want to know, is there a strain of Reuteri that's best at these things? But too early. So right now we're using the BioGaia strains from a product called Gastrus, Gastrus. And that's the 17938 strain, the 6475 strain. And those have worked okay. And then lastly, the Bacillus coagulans strains. It's the Gunedin strain, the GBI 306086. It's sold as, I believe it's Shift Digestive Advantage. So you can get it at like Walmart, Target for like $16. So you need a capsule of each. We put them in, empty the capsule into a bowl. I use organic half and half because it makes them the nicest, thickest.
Yeah, my doctor tried different things, and she found the half and half worked best. We have a lot of health enthusiasts. Don't use raw cream or raw milk. I mean, it sounds healthier, but the bacteria in those compete, and you don't get as good a rise. So it's better to do just organic half and half.
Yeah, because we're fermenting, that is increasing microbial counts. If your raw milk is contaminated with a little teensy-weensy bit of Staphylococcus aureus or Listeria, you can actually die of the yogurt. So we don't want to do that. Yeah, so, or if you use raw, you got to preheat it. You got to pasteurize it yourself, in effect. Now, organic half and half that has been pasteurized is the easiest. It doesn't have to be dairy, by the way. You can use coconut milk, but there's several additional steps you need to go through to prevent separation. People will need some kind of device to keep their yogurt. These microbes, different microbes prefer different temperatures. So Reuteri loves human body temperature, and it dies at about 108, 109 degrees Fahrenheit. But Bacillus coagulans, the spore former, likes 115, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. So how do we do that? So I just chose 106 as kind of a compromise, and we're getting good results with 106 degrees. Yeah. But ideally, everyone will need a device that you can adjust the temperature and time. A yogurt maker, a sous vide device, an instant pot. Some people use dehydrating device, doesn't matter. Just so long as you can set the temperature and then walk away for many hours.
And 106, 36 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, but you'd also add a prebiotic. Inulin is a choice, and then potato starch, right, is a prebiotic that you could use as well to feed the bacteria, right?
Exactly.
Now, people with SIBO would go, "Oh my God, I can't do it." You just said inulin's bad, but it obviously gets eaten up, so the bacteria feed from it.
People who have really bad SIBO might have to inch into this kind of a process. That is, that's exactly right. The prebiotic fiber there shouldn't be much left because the microbes eat. It's like throwing cow manure on your tomato patch. Right. When you eat the tomato, you're not eating cow manure.
Yeah. That's a good example. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, the point is, I mean, inexpensive solution. I'm excited, to see these results especially with these hard cases. I'm so glad that we, have a doctor group. Hey, it's more fun to experiment with people than mice when you have a doctor group that's willing. So we will have some results from people and mice coming soon. And you said it's a month, right? The month is pretty much you're eating the yogurt for a month. You might get addicted to it and like it and keep eating it, but 1 month.
I'm in that direction. Exactly right. It's so benign and tasty, and there's so much recurrence, as you well know, of SIBO, that I'm seeing more and more people just say, I'm going to eat it all the time. Maybe not every day, but maybe every other day, every third day. And it seems to be very effective at preventing SIBO recurrence. Because you got to wonder, because of those two properties, that is, microbes that colonize the upper GI tract and produce bacteriocins, and we've lost those microbes. Almost nobody, without the yogurt or without a probiotic containing these microbes, almost nobody has Lactobacillus rhodori anymore. Almost nobody has Lactobacillus gasseri anymore, even though they're ubiquitous in these indigenous populations who don't get exposed to antibiotics, and in animals, in mammals. So if we were to test a chipmunk or a squirrel or a moose, they all have these microbes. We've lost them. You got to wonder, is that one of the underlying causes for the epidemic of SIBO?
I've asked that question, and you might be onto something, right? So, I mean, do we know for sure? No, but I think it's a good theory because in mine, it was very sudden. These oral microbes, which are extremely nasty, probably, if your theory is correct, really, killed off a lot of my strains and left me in a dysbiosis in the small intestine. And that's been the problem. And I've been successful at cleaning them off, but then it comes back because my theory is that's why I'm here, or that's why I brought you here, because I know that there's few strains in my small intestine that have been affected that still have not come back, and therefore it leaves me vulnerable to this. Let's talk a little bit about some of these causes, because just like anything, if you don't get rid of the cause, then you may not get well. I agree. I mean, the standard American diet, a lot of these lifestyle things have probably led to the die-off of these bacteria that we're talking about. But there's also, like me, sudden causes. Food poisoning was probably the first cause that was identified, right? Certain people, you get food poisoning, your own immune system then can activate against a complex of nerves called the migrating motor complex. Its job is to move food through the small intestine so this fermentation doesn't happen, right? And so a lot of people somehow destroy that migrating motor complex. So there's a cause. Low stomach acid is a cause, but that can be caused by a lot of different things. The ileocecal valve being open from the large, it's a valve that prevents things coming from the large intestine back into the small intestine. There can be a problem with that. So, talk a little bit about some of these more popular causes, because I'm telling you, there's a list. We don't have time to talk to them all.
Yeah, it's a real tangle. And some people, as you well know, you have to just go through the list methodically and try to deal with them.
Yeah.
I'll tell you though, one clear-cut advantage is, and what we talked about in the beginning, that is getting rid of wheat and grains.
Yeah.
Because the gliadin protein of wheat, in addition to yielding opioid peptides that stimulate appetite, also cause slowing of peristalsis, of the propulsive action in your gastrointestinal tract. So a lot of people with chronic constipation or even obstipation, those are people who move their bowels every 2 weeks or so and live on enemas and stool softeners and laxatives. These people, I've seen that go away within days of wheat and grain elimination. So I think that's kind of a built-in advantage. The magnesium that we talk about that causes an osmotic effect, that is, it pulls water into the GI tract, also provides advantage because it accelerates so-called transit time.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have any magical formulas. You know, if you have hypochlorhydria, like that is lack of stomach acid because you had H. pylori for many years that was unrecognized, or you had wheat-induced autoimmune gastritis that ruined your parietal cells, or whatever the cause of your lack of stomach acid, there's no way to regrow the parietal cells, unfortunately. So you're stuck with doing things like betaine hydrochloride and carbonated drinks and other ways to acidify the stomach. And even that doesn't restore everything. So you're right. There's a whole list of things to go through, not all of which we have a solution for that I'm aware of, like an incompetent ileocecal valve. I don't know of any solutions for that.
Right. Well, look, I'm sure we can get they can get your book on Amazon. Hold it up one more time just so people can, if they didn't write down the title, there it is right there. And look, I think you bring a unique perspective on this problem. Yeah, I mean, some of the leaders in this research, SIBO, that have been just, putting so much time and effort, are they reaching out to you at all on some of your results?
No, we will be publishing our own evidence, not so much in SIBO. My research focus is Reuteri. So that's one of the 3 microbes, of course, because that we haven't had a chance to talk about that. But one of the benefits, I should say, some of the benefits of restoring Reuteri, not just eradicating the microbes of SIBO, but there's also a boost in oxytocin. And that is a big deal because what we're seeing, so a lot of this was described in mouse studies from MIT from 2013 to 2017. And we're seeing this all play out in humans. So when we restore Reuteri in big numbers, colonize the upper GI tract, et cetera, it sends a signal to the brain to release oxytocin. And oxytocin, of course, the hormone of love and empathy. So people will say things like, I like my partner better. I like my family better. I like my coworkers better. My favorite, I understand the opinions of other people better, even if I disagree.
Yeah, right.
That's great.
That's really important, by the way.
Yeah. So
we could change the world with one bacteria, perhaps. I don't know.
I think that's right. I think we're making people better human beings.
Yeah.
But the ladies go berserk. What kills me is the ladies often say, we don't care about that. We just want smoother skin, because that's what happens. People start to lose their wrinkles because of the boost in oxytocin that causes dermal collagen to increase. Guys love it because you get a huge boost in strength and muscle mass. It also preserves bone density. You get deep sleep. I'm a chronic insomniac. I now sleep like a baby 9 hours straight through just from restoring Reuteri.
So Bill, I have to ask the question. I mean, because right now you have all of my audience going, okay, I want Reuteri. Okay, I'm making yogurt. People are going to be making yogurt, right? But I mean, can we make it more simple? Can we put these numbers in a pill? Can't we get 250 million strains, billion strains in a pill?
It's very expensive. I've tried. I have a product. I'll just mention, it's called Gut to Glow. It's for the ladies, for their skin, but it has 40 billion counts, and that is really expensive to do. So to try to get 250 billion, say, and one thing I don't know, and we have not done this, we will do this. We have a human trial about to start. We're going to try to establish a dose response. In other words, if 10 billion is helpful, is 50 billion better? Is 100, 250, a trillion better? Nobody knows. There's so little dose response evidence in the world of the probiotics and microbiome. We will try to do that in our skin trial, to try to look at the equivalent, human equivalent of 10 billion and 50 billion. But right now, our product has 40 billion. But it also has some other things for to keep the ladies happy: marine source collagen hydrolysates, hyaluronic acid, and astaxanthin, the carotenoid. But so far, we've had a lot of good feedback, by the way. But nobody knows. Don't know. We will know probably by the end of the year, when our mouse trial, first human trial, and several subsequent human trials get started, and I'll be able to report back to you, say, okay, right. Ideally, one of the other things I want to know is, are there better strains of rhodorite for this specific effect, the oxytocin effect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for your research. Honestly, so many lives. You're right. 150 million people, most likely across the country, suffering from this, most of which unknowingly to them. I don't know the percentage of that 150 million that are diagnosed, but I bet very few.
Absolutely. So that's why what you're doing, what I'm doing, I hope is important, because we're educating, and you're educating doctors, which is fabulous, because that's how we get to all those people who think that just avoiding nightshades is a solution, or FODMAPs, or just taking an anti-inflammatory drug, or taking some drug for a neurodegenerative disorder, not paying attention to there's so much here. This is enough to occupy several careers.
I agree. All these food reactions, oxalates, nightshades, lectins, I mean, all of it. I believe all those things are normal in food. However, our reaction isn't normal. And I believe that this SIBO problem is most likely the causative factor, massive epidemic.
Absolutely. No doubt whatsoever. I agree.
Dr. Davis, thank you. Gosh, thank you for being here. Thank you for your research.
My pleasure.
For your book. And we're going to follow up with a part 2 on this once this research is done. My little study that we're doing, yours, we're going to get back together on here. So we'll see you on a part 2.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, CHTV. Look, at a time like this, I think that our immune system and keeping our immune system up right now is more important than ever. I can also tell you that I pay attention to the things that keep my immune system on par and healthy. So glad that CHTV is one of our sponsors here on Cell TV. And it's a product that I use, my family uses, and hopefully you'll check it out. And by the way, you can check it out with the link right here below. If you want to try a free bottle, you can actually get a free bottle, just pay the shipping. And I think you'll reorder after that, but check it out.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing CHTV product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit freeimmunity.com. Again, that's freeimmunity.com. Well, that's it for this week. The materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you would like to purchase some of the supplements mentioned on this show, please visit the site as seen on CHTV.com and use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. Again, that's as seen on CHTV.com. Use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. And as always, thanks for listening.